Hello and welcome to Face to Face. My name is Godfred Akotobuaf. Today our guest on the show is one of the most distinguished academics in the country. He is also one of the most distinguished economists anywhere you find in the world. He used to be the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Ghana, and these days some say he's spending a quiet retirement, although he might tell us otherwise. Professor Ernest Aryeetey is our guest on the show. Prof, welcome.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you for having me.
Yes, Prof, I read about you, and I found out you are an expert in economics of development. Everybody knows economics. What is economics of development?
It's a very interesting question. When economics began as an academic discipline, it was mainly concerned with the challenges of what you call the industrialized world. So it was concerned with the issues that we call today macroeconomics of Europe, later North America. It was not until much later in the last century that the issues of developing countries gained some standing in the way we studied economics and did research. So when in the 1950s, many people began studying how growth could be achieved in some of the newly emerging countries at the time, that we had what we call today development economics. How do you modify or contextualize economics for the developing countries? That's what it's all about. So my area of interest is how do we ensure that the types of policies that we have are those that will work in developing countries and not simply taking whatever is available from the industrialized economies.
That's a pretty interesting explanation of it and your interest, considering Ghana's history with economic partners from the West, like the IMF, the World Bank, the WTO, and its other political partners. Was that a factor in pushing you to look at economics of development?
Well, when I went into economics, basically in the sixth form, the issues of interest to us were how do we achieve high productivity in agriculture? How do we industrialize our economy? How do we ensure that the population of Ghana is not growing too fast? Those were the types of things that we were studying. Relationships with the development partners were a non-issue. They were not very much at the center of things that we covered. Those things became really important and interesting only in the last 30 or so years. Before then, not that much.
And when you returned to Ghana and you started teaching, you started from the economics department?
I started from ISA, but I was teaching part-time at the economics department.
ISA is an interesting unit. There are those who say it's undervalued. You agree?
I wouldn't even say undervalued. I mean, ISA has performed creditably over the many years. That's been in the system since 1962. It has, in my view, performed quite well at different points in time. There have been other times when it has been consumed by some of the malaise you find in Ghanaian institutions. But I think altogether, it's been a fairly useful institution, both for the university and for Ghana. What many people don't know that ISA was the creation of the Ministry of Finance. It was largely intended to provide the kind of research required to support economic policy making. That's why ISA was created. And I think to a very large extent, it did that very well.
There are those who are of the opinion that it has been neglected. Its opinion doesn't matter. The research it puts out no longer factors in when it comes to policy making, which, as you said, was at the heart of it being conceptualized by the Ministry of Finance.
Let's not forget that in the 60s, there was hardly any competition for ideas. There were no institutions around that provided some kind of contestation for different policies and so on. There were hardly any institutions around, and even any people around who were doing any serious research that could be considered for policy making. So when ISA started, it didn't have much competition. It didn't have much competition at all. But let's acknowledge the fact that in the last 20 years, or let's say the last 30 years, following structural adjustment, and also with the different policies that came with reforms, there are now a number of what we call think tanks that do some of the work that ISA had needed to do in the beginning. What I find missing is competition among these think tanks, including ISA, competition for selling the best ideas. So they seem to be all happy with their niche in the market, but development and the sound policy making thrives on very, very good competition. I like to see researchers compete to sell the ideas. You know, that's how good policies emerge. In Ghana, largely because we don't have that, I think the process of bringing policy, research into policy making has been rather muted.
Is that part of the reason why people say there's a huge gap between academia and policy making?
It might be a contributory factor. Let me put it this way. Policymakers don't value research much, and the researchers make no attempt to influence the policy. So there's a gap there. And it's something that there are a number of institutions in Africa trying to bridge that gap. It's an area of concern to people like me. How do you make African policy makers pay attention to good research? I mean, there's good research and there's bad research, but when there's good research, how do you make African policy makers pay attention to that? And how do you encourage the researchers to pursue only good research?
Is there good funding for R&D?
No, there isn't. There isn't. It has improved a lot since our time.
From domestic sources, I mean?
No, most of the research that is done is funded from outside, almost 100%.
That's troubling.
It is troubling, yes. It is troubling. We were in Nairobi 2 weeks ago discussing this very issue. How do we get African governments to understand that without solid research, there's no way they can achieve the SDGs. You know, you can't achieve the SDGs without research, and that research is not going to come from outside. It has to come from within, and so it's time, whether they like it or not, to pay attention to research. If they don't, we are not going anywhere.
It must be frustrating for you.
It is. It is. I mean, we've spent a whole lifetime trying to generate new knowledge, try to provide information to be used for policy making. It is often quite frustrating trying to convince people in policy making positions that let's consider this for the employment situation, let's consider that for agricultural improvement, let's consider this for industrial development. And they are probably they are usually happier to listen to ideas from outside.
I want to talk to you about your time as Vice-Chancellor of the University of Ghana. Mm-hmm. When you were appointed, what was the larger vision for you?
You know, it was very interesting. I became Vice-Chancellor in 2010. At the time I was appointed, I was at the Brookings Institution in Washington, trying very hard to create what we call the African voice. How do we bring into policy making around the world the views of African economists? At the time, we thought most of these debates about global development, whether it was for the reduction of poverty or the reduction in inequalities, not enough people at the World Bank, UNDP, the IMF, the wider development networks around, nobody was paying much attention to what Africans were saying. And so my mission as the director of the Africa Growth Initiative was basically to bring to the attention of the development partners what the African researchers were saying from their work, whether they were in Angola or they were in Mozambique or in Tanzania, Zambia, what they were saying. Whether it could be concerning poverty reduction, it could be concerning inequality and so on. While I was doing that, I was invited to become Vice-Chancellor of the University of Ghana. I thought this would be a great opportunity to bring those voices into our own discussion. How do we modernize our university? So my mission was to modernize the University of Ghana.
They didn't look at you as an outsider?
Oh, a few people did, but most people who knew me had known me from my time at ESA, from my time as a student here. So of course, there are always people who are skeptical about somebody coming in from outside, but I've been outside for less than a year. Okay. So it didn't really matter. I knew the university much better than most people anyway, so it couldn't be used against me. But my mission was basically to modernize the University of Ghana in its practices, in the way we taught, in the kind of research that we did, in the kind of opportunity we gave to our students, we gave to our younger faculty especially. That was my mission, really. And I talked about creating a world-class university. People thought it was a joke, we are talking about an institution that had become used to its ways, had become used to the challenges that students faced. No water, no power, not enough food, overcrowded dormitories, overcrowded lecture rooms. People had become used to it. They'd seen it for many years and they didn't think it could change, But it had to change. When I accepted the appointment, I knew I was going to face many challenges. First of all, trying to convince people that there was a need for change. And I wasn't at all mistaken. Those challenges came, but I believe that we managed to overcome them. So I was strongly interested in the university being a leader when it came to teaching. I was very interested in research, making the university a lot more focused on research. Through research, you make yourself more relevant to your environment. You make yourself relevant to your policymakers, to the private sector. I was interested in governance. I thought the University of Ghana was rather too bureaucratic, was over-centralized. The Vice-Chancellor at the top had a lot of authority, which easily could be delegated to other people in order to make it more effective and more efficient. So governance was a major area of interest. Of course, the infrastructure at the university was in a very, very bad state. The roads were horrible. Laboratories had no equipment. The lecture rooms were in a very bad state. So things were bad. On the gender front, everything was male-dominated, whether in terms of student numbers or faculty numbers. And so I had to change. The ability of the university to raise funds was extremely poor. About 90% of our resources were coming from the government. And I saw government officials basically bluff the university. Every allocation to the university was seen as a waste. So we had to change that culture. Then we had to deal with the ICT infrastructure. It was a university that had invested quite a bit in ICT, but the results were not being observed. So how do we continue to invest, and make sure that it affects the way we teach, it affects the way students learn, and it affects the way we do research. So these were the things that occupied me. So almost everything that I did subsequently was to deal with one or the other of these. So we used that to prepare a strategic plan for the university, and I think it was one of the good things that we did.
Now, Prof, how easy was it to get buy-in for this? Because I attended the University of Ghana, a very, very conservative community of lecturers. Even the students have a certain feeling about progress at the university. Surely it must not have been easy.
No, it wasn't. There were huge challenges in terms of getting people to accept the need for change, and also they making their own contribution to that change process. But we began with organizing events that imply that I would meet with faculty, I would meet with the unions, then I would meet with students. I went from hall to hall at the University of Ghana, 2011, selling them. First of all, I sold the ideas I had to the University Council. They bought them. And then they say, yeah, fine, see how you can best market the same thing to the community. So I had meetings with UTAG, I had meetings with TEU, I had meetings with the FUSAG, all the different staff unions. We finished with that, met with the convocation, and then went on to meet with the students. I went from hall to hall with my colleagues, preaching the new word about how to, what we wanted to achieve. Many thought, yes, this was just another litany of woes without any concrete solutions to them. Of course, we told them what we wanted to do. With time, people began to see the sense in some of the things we're trying to do. When we began some of the reforms, especially in the academic side, the first thing we did was to restructure the PhD program. Restructure the PhD program. Most people at the faculty were not interested. They had become used to a PhD system, even though it wasn't going anywhere. They were quite comfortable with it. They didn't challenge them much. But there was no way you're going to be doing good research with a poor PhD program. And so we had to change it. After a lot of pushing and shoving, we managed to do that within 2 years. When that was done, we moved to dealing with the course structures in various places, the curriculum of various departments, forcing change, forcing discussion. The 4-year program, we introduced reforms into it, which allowed every year to count towards your degree. So, of course, it meant for students that when you came there, you couldn't just waste the first year of your education at the University of Ghana. There were a number of things. The library was revamped. Through support from the Carnegie Corporation of New York, the library was effectively modernized and the new technologies brought there. So as people began to see these things, they began to appreciate the need or the seriousness with which we are pursuing our program. In the area of research, we were able to identify 4 areas that we thought the University of Ghana should become known for. I said to my colleagues, in every university around the world, when you go there and you say, this university, what is it known for? Clearly, you can tell. There are universities that are known for engineering, there are universities that are known for medicine, known for law, even though they have many other things. But what are we known for? What are we known for? I thought we should be known for our work in malaria, for example. I thought we should be known for our work in climate change. I thought we should be known for our work in food security and also in poverty. So I created, with my colleagues, what we call the Centers of Excellence for these things. The idea being to mobilize resources from outside and from within to support research in these areas. It was going quite well. I thought we were able to put quite a bit of money into that and make sure that things were going quite well. We supported a number of people to go outside and do PhD. That was soon after we began seriously to pursue the long-established rule that lecturers must have PhDs. So we supported them. There was a time when there were 270 people, both within and outside, doing PhD in order to come and teach. Many of them with support from the university. We pursued strongly the policy of trying to make the university gender balanced, improving significantly admission for females, increasing the number of female faculty, promotions to senior positions made structured in such a manner that they didn't work against women. So there were clearly, for everything that we were pursuing, some activity taking place. In the infrastructure is one area that we dealt with much later when we pursued PPPs for our roads and for other facilities and so on. So yes, the challenges were there. We had to market the ideas to a very skeptical audience. When they began to see results, they became convinced that it was doable. Students were strongly opposed to decongestion. There were students sleeping 7, 8, 9, 10 in a room. We changed that to 3-4 students in a room.
But they also say you reduced the liberal school life that they were used to. You turned campus into almost like a secondary school.
Which is completely untrue. What I find interesting, I had a very, very interesting relationship with students. When we began, they were very skeptical and non-cooperative. By the time we were done, they had begun to see the new university, where there was a lot more opportunity than before. Students had 24-hour internet access in their rooms. Having internet access in your rooms means that you can effectively communicate with anyone in the world 24 hours a day.
You're watching Face to Face with Professor Ernest Aryeetey, telling us about how he went about his job as the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Ghana. When we return, we will still stay with the University of Ghana and talk about his legacy after leaving and why there is contention that his legacy has been tarnished. Keep watching Face to Face.
For all the news, analysis, projections, and policies that affect your business, curated and delivered in a simple and timely format. Watch Business Dashboard, your most comprehensive source of business news, every weekday at 7 p.m. only on CTTV.
Welcome back to Face with Professor Ernest Aryeetey. Now, Prof, you had gone in there, you had done all these things. You needed money to do it. In the period since you've left, however, questions have arisen about how you did some of these things in terms of agreements that you signed. Africa Integras is one that has come up, which was the plan to double infrastructure in the university, build new schools, new colleges of education, and other things. And there are those who say you were a one-man show when it came to this. You didn't discuss this with anybody. You went ahead and bulldozed your way through it. What do you say to this? Is this the situation?
Anybody who knows how universities work around the world and here in Ghana would know that it's not possible. It's not possible to do a one-man show. The university has rules that are captured both in the act establishing it and in the statutes. One of the things I pride myself in very much is the fact that I came to appreciate the act and the statutes very, very well. And as a result, was always guided by these. There's absolutely no way you can borrow, and the statutes are very clear as a vice-chancellor, you can borrow money without the approval of the university council. It's not possible. So I would have expected that if I was entering into an agreement of a financial nature for which I had no authority for the 3 years that this was negotiated, somebody would have raised the issue that why are you negotiating this? You know, when we signed the agreement in full public view at the Great Hall with all the former vice-chancellors present, all the council members of the university present, ministers of state present, students, faculty present, why did anybody say that we haven't approved this? I hope you understand me. So the whole transaction, I've written about it, but these innuendos, these rumors that have been let out by a section of people at the university are not founded or not grounded in any facts. I've been extremely surprised that these issues have been out in the public space, and nobody has found it fitting or appropriate to do a thorough investigation of it.
Have they spoken to you?
Well, journalists have asked me questions.
No, I mean the university.
The university. The university invited me to a meeting. We had a half discussion for about 30 minutes. And, I have made the offer on several occasions that let's put these agreements down, bring everybody involved. Let's sit down. And if there are any questions that you have, ask me. Ask me any questions that you believe that I'm best placed to answer. It hasn't happened. Let's have a proper criminal investigation if necessary. It hasn't happened. So, for me, it's clear that people don't want to know the truth. Today, I'm stating it again. If anybody believes that I did something wrong, let him come out and say it publicly. Ernest Aryeetey did this wrong.
Do you believe that $64 million deal was the best deal you could have gotten for the university?
There's no doubt in my mind, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that the agreement that we entered into was the best at the time. And there's also enough information that since that agreement was signed and since the project began, many other opportunities have been provided for us to even improve on our situation within the agreement, which has not been taken up by the university. So the misinformation, the lies, for me are not warranted. It's obvious to me that it's intended to tarnish my image. But I can assure you that even with all of this going on, my life continues.
Are you disappointed with the way the university community that you led has handled this issue?
Many things have happened that I believe could have been done differently. And there are many people who have authority in this country who could have said, what's going on? Let's sit down, let's talk about it, let's discuss it, let's investigate what's going on, but haven't. So if there's disappointment, there are many places where you can place it. The fact that you retire and you want to have some peace of mind to do other things, and it's not happening because people are simply not doing what they should be doing. It's very sad, it's very, very sad. But hey, I've moved on and I've offered that why don't you give the agreement to some of the best finance guys, best architects, best engineers, best lawyers to go through and tell us. I've seen a lot of misrepresentation of what's in it. I've seen a lot of false analysis done based on figures in there, all intended to misrepresent what's in the agreement. And people hide behind non-disclosure clauses in there. I mean, it's,
but they say you had those NDAs put in the contract. That is why they cannot talk about it.
It's not true. It is not true. The agreement was signed by University of Gaana and Africa Integras based on discussions that the two parties had. Lawyers from both sides poured through this. The lawyers made recommendations and we accepted. So it isn't, anybody that says that only Ernest Aryeetey did this, I can assure you it's a liar. Anybody that says that the University of Gaana, its council, its senior management, its executive committee had no knowledge of the discussions that went into the agreement, is a liar. There's a lot of pain there, I must say, but I've moved on. Okay. I have moved on. I take a lot of satisfaction from seeing that many of the young students that I worked with are doing very well in their careers. I take a lot of pride in seeing a lot of the young faculty that we produced or we invited and supported are doing extremely well. So that's where the satisfaction comes from. And there are enough records to show that. There are minutes of meetings that easily show or vindicate my position. They have records of what people said at meetings, their contribution to discussions, what documents they had, So there is enough information to show at the university that everything I've said is true. People have said things like the money that was going to be paid was simply for the $64 million that was being spent on the course. It is not true. It's a BOT, build, operate, transfer, build, operate it for 25 years. For 25 years, the maintenance of those buildings was going to be part of the rent being paid. For 25 years, the rehabilitation of those buildings was going to be part of the equipment used in the laboratories, was going to be part of it. It doesn't come that cheap anywhere, But when people talk about it, it's very convenient. They say, oh, the university went and borrowed 64. It is not true. Somebody was going to spend 64 minutes to build. That's only for the construction. And when it is finished, for 25 years, the maintenance of the building, the operation of the building, the staff salaries and so for 25 years, it's all part of the rent that you're paying, and that has been kept away from the public. That's not been part of any discussion. It's extremely unfortunate. It's designed to destroy me, but I can assure you it's not going to happen.
When you look at the university now, from where you sit, how competitive is the University of Ghana? You've worked and taught in some of the best universities around the world. Where do you place the University of Ghana as it is now?
It's difficult for me to talk about where it is now because I haven't been much engaged in the documentation on its research outputs and so on over the past 2 years and so on. So it's very difficult to, but I don't think too much has changed since I left. By the time I was leaving, we had risen significantly in rankings. We had become the 7th highest placed university in Africa, where all those ahead of us, except Pretoria from South Africa, where there's a lot of investment in higher education. So our standing internationally had risen considerably over the period. And it was always evident where it came from. It came from increased research. It came from improvements in management, the governance system improving. It came from the investments in the IT. It came from our students being more exposed. It came from international students coming here. So, yes, I think the University of Ghana is quite well placed. It's quite well placed to compete very, very well in the sub-region.
There is an argument that if you go to Asia, for instance, and you look at how education in places like Vietnam, Singapore, China, Japan, Korea has risen. There's been a lot of investment in practicable learning and practicable application of knowledge. When you look at education in Ghana from secondary school level through tertiary institutions, there's a lot of theoretical learning, and perhaps it is time that changed. You are in the educational setup. Is this what the situation is?
It's not an either-or thing that we need to look at. There are good reasons for learning theory. There are very, very good reasons for learning theory. The problem in many developing countries, especially here in Africa, is our failure to apply the theory. So I hear people say all the time that we don't need theory. It's not true. I disagree with that. You need theory. Theory is basically the result of many years of observation. Many people has informed the theory. You can't discard it, but you can contextualize it. You can learn how to apply it to your own situation. That's what we don't do well. That's what we don't do well. So when people say, why are you spending so much time on theory? I have difficulty with that kind of argument. What they should be saying is, why are you not applying the theory properly?
But isn't it
to your
persons like yourself in academia who should push that agenda? It's not the student who can push this.
It's not the student. It's not one person. The student must be interested in the first place. The professor must know how to do it. And the government must support it. Industry must support it. Let me give you one example. In every African country today, and we've been doing that for many years, we talk about STEM. Let's support science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Yes, everybody says, let's do it. Let's put more money into this. I fully support it. I fully appreciate it. But I also know that students are not going to be very enthusiastic about doing STEM if they know that a year, 2 years after leaving the university, they will still be unemployed. So what it tells me is that while you are pursuing STEM, you must also be pursuing the demand side, the industry that would employ them, the units that would make use of their scientific knowledge. So what's the point in spending all your money on science education when you are not making any effort to industrialize? It doesn't make any sense to me. Usually those who are making the arguments for STEM are thinking only about the institution, the supply side. They're thinking that, we need to get more people doing science. Yes, we need to do that. But we also need to look ahead. Look at what they will do when they leave the university, what they will do when they leave the polytechnic. We haven't done that. That's where I think the problem is. So, you want to do STEM? Yes, let's do it. But let's not do it in isolation. Today, STEM is increasingly being linked to other things. The technologies require a lot of multidisciplinary application. So the fact that your scientists can work very well with social scientists, with non-scientists, is becoming a very interesting area that we should be looking at. We shouldn't be caught in approaches that are self-serving. We should be caught in approaches that within a matter of a few years will become obsolete. Let's think globally. Let's think big. Let's think about how we can bring about change that will last, change that will make everybody count, change that will make education very inclusive. Many of the things that we have introduced in the area of education in the last 40 years in this country have not been informed by any research. We have the education sector has seen the most change in terms of how units are run. Most of the changes have been occasioned by self-interest or by one group or the other complaining about something, not based on research that shows what the largest benefits will be to the system. So almost every change, whether it's 3 years, 4 years, whether it's 3 years, or whether it's when the school curriculum should begin and end and so on, it's all driven by somebody's interests. That is where the problem is. That is where we should be looking at what is it that would make us have a system of education that is comprehensive, that deals with all the different challenges that we face as a society and as an economy. We haven't done that.
Okay. Now, before we move on to talk about hardcore economics and economic policy, I saw you on the front row when Madame Lagarde visited, so we'll get to that. But finally, on this particular theme, you spoke about the free SHS, and a lot of people said, Professor Aryeetey says free SHS is going to be too expensive. Is that what you said?
It's not true. Again, one of the distortions. These days, when you're speaking publicly, it's a very challenging thing in the sense that people like to put a spin on it. I didn't say it's too expensive, and so let's no. I said, and I did preface my comments at the event that I had nothing against providing free SHS so long as we can make it sustainable. It's how do you make it sustainable? You don't make it sustainable by making free for everybody. That was my point. There are those who, let me put it this way, I believe that everybody that has the capacity to have senior high school education should be assisted one way or the other to go through that. I believe that we should enhance the enrollment rates even more, even though they are improving. We should do even more. My point is, if you don't do it well, it will become a major stopper to everything else that you want to do in the economy. You'll be spending money, lots and lots of money, but you'll not be getting the results that you are looking for. And that's a fact. It didn't just me saying it. I mean, there's enough evidence to show that. So, how do you ensure that you have enough of the resources required to run your senior high school system? You need contributions from everywhere that you can find that contribution, whether it's from parents, whether it's from industry, whether it's from donors, whether it's from government. You need that because it's going to require a lot of money. So saying that parents who can afford should not pay means to me that basically you are choosing to disregard a major contribution. It's a contribution, but you are choosing to disregard it. If you are choosing to disregard, there must be a very good reason for it. And what is that reason? I can't find it, And in many places where we provide free education, or the government provides free education, it is based on the structure of the education system itself. They are day schools. So they are schools that are located in the community in which these kids live. So they walk 5 minutes, they go to school, they are given free tuition, then they go home and study, do their homework, have their lunch and so on. I'm not aware of anywhere else where kids of a fairly well-to-do middle class, they leave home and spend several weeks in a dormitory, and they are fed 3 times a day. They are provided entertainment, health care, every possible care that you will give to young people for free. I haven't seen it anywhere, and I'm not convinced that you need it. So why don't you have a system where those who can afford it make a contribution, and those who can afford it, who cannot afford it, are assisted? It's fair, it is progressive, and it's effective and efficient. So, if you can show me that as a result of making it free for everybody, you are going to get better outcomes than what I'm proposing, then why don't you try it? Decision making should be based on proven effectiveness and efficiency. We shouldn't be taking decisions in national policy making based on instinct, based on narrow politics, based on what will make us popular. Anybody who says I said that, again, is lying, is misrepresenting me. Let them come in. Let those who can afford it pay. Those who cannot afford it, make it free.
All right, then you are listening to Professor Ernest Aryeetey on Face to Face. We'll be right back.
For regular news checks as they unfold, 2020 news all day, all the time. Politics, sports, entertainment, business, and more.
Well, that's all for 2020 news on City TV. All the news in 20 minutes.
Welcome back to Face to Face. Now, Prof, you wrote a book, Economic Reforms in Ghana, The Miracle and the Mirage. I found the title very interesting in reference to Ghana's economic recovery and economic management and economic reforms. Tell me why you picked that particular title, Miracle, because we know where we came from, but the Mirage.
When we began the reforms in 1983, we're very hopeful. We're very hopeful that the changes that were taking place in various sectors, whether the financial sector, trade, policy, the exchange rate management, etc., would lead to some stability. And as a result of the stability, the economy would take off. Would take off, and we'll see very significant rises in per capita GDP. We'll see a lowering of the poverty rate significantly. We thought we were going to see a significant change in the structure of the economy as we became more and more productive, moving resources from the less productive areas to more productive areas. So we expected that. As structural adjustment rolled on, in the early 90s, it was fairly common to hear everybody praising Ghana. Praising Ghana for the miraculous changes that had taken place. They'd managed to bring inflation down from over 100% to fairly low numbers, lower 20s and so on. People were very exuberant about the fact that the exchange rate had stabilized. People were happy that the shops were filled. So these were the miracles, the changes that had not been foreseen a decade earlier. But the fact that things were not going to follow the path over the long haul in terms of what we were expecting, employment creation, new industries, and so on. Nobody was talking about that. So the mirage part of that title was to reflect the things that we see, but are not what we are not really. The thing that what we think we are seeing is not what we are seeing. That's basically the meaning. What you think you are seeing is not what you are seeing. All that glitters is not gold. Basically, that was the point. There were structural issues which have dogged the economy even to now, up to this point. We have those structural issues. They are difficult. They are difficult to manage. We haven't been able to deal with them for many different reasons. But the book did shed light on what those structural challenges were. So, for example, when we explained in the book about financial liberalization, and we talked about how, as a result of the reforms, we expected that with greater competition in the banking system, interest rates would come down. Interest rates didn't come down. It didn't come down significantly. It didn't come down, even though there had been massive reforms. We had removed many of the non-performing loans from the books of banks and all that. Today, they aren't there. Today, it is those same things that are forcing banks to be closed down. Because, in my view, we didn't take care of the structural issues. We didn't take care of the things that made the banking system structured the way it was. And until we do those things...
You still don't see attempts being made to fix those. The Bank of Ghana and its governors seem to think that they're on the right path. The Ministry of Finance...
They are certainly on the right path in terms of the policy reforms. And we've been doing that, and I think they are doing very, very well on that. There are still structural issues. The structural issues refer to many different things, including information upon which decision-making is based within the banking system. Why don't we lend to agriculture? The reasons why we didn't lend to agriculture in 1957 are the same reasons why we don't lend to agriculture today. So we don't have enough information about the investment being made. We don't have enough information about the enterprise and so on. It is until you've dealt with those things, until banks are comfortable to lend to agriculture, you are not going to modernize agriculture. I hope you understand the point. Yes.
So I saw you around when Madam Christine Lagarde of the IMF visited recently. What have you made of Ghana's relationship with the IMF over the years?
I think it's been an interesting relationship. Very
useful?
Yeah, very, very useful, I think. The IMF has often provided support as a stopgap measure In times of instability, the IMF has always been there to assist. So I think it's a very worthy relationship, one that clearly has had its ups and downs over the years, which probably led to Ghana going out of the IMF program and then coming back and so on. For me, it's an issue of how do you use the resources that are made available? How do you use the space that you buy in terms of policy? How do you use that to prepare for a longer term transformation that reduces your need to go back to the IMF from time to time? How do you ensure that when you receive support from the IMF, the space that is created is used to invest in high productivity areas? Is used to generate high returns. Of course, it's a very, very difficult thing, but it's something that is unavoidable. So you've got to force yourself to make the sacrifices that would be required in order to do the transformation. So running back to the IMF from time to time is inevitable. What you do with the space that you buy is the most or more critical thing that we need to think about. I have no difficulty at all with using an IMF program when necessary. My concern is about what you have within your policy-making structures for dealing with the real issues.
But there are those who also say the IMF is designed to keep countries like Ghana on its knees. There's just, to choose your words, a mirage of support going forward. But in the long term, the IMF benefits from keeping countries like us on our knees.
I have never looked at it that way, and I don't see the incentive for the IMF to want to do that. Of course, when countries, I've seen arguments like as countries leave the IMF program, the relevance of the institution itself is called into question. There are many other things that can call the relevance of the institution into question. But I think it's important for us to understand what happens to nations when they are on or off IMF programs. I don't think the IMF was out there to want to keep us on a program. What we haven't done is our problem. We shouldn't place our problems on the doorstep of the IMF.
At all, okay. Ghana says it is out. In fact, the year is over and will not want to return. Those are the words of the president. He's also spoken about building the fundamentals of the economy. Do you see progress being made? To the ordinary Ghanaian, he would tell you it's been a very difficult year. The currency has struggled. Businesses have struggled. Banks have struggled. And yet the message is the fundamentals are strong. You are an economist. What are the fundamentals?
The fundamentals, basically, the macro fundamentals, things to do with the inflation, the exchange rate, and so on, they appear sound. What the president is referring to is the fact that the growth rate appears quite impressive. What he's referring to again is that inflation appears contained. He's referring to the fact that the exchange rate appears sometimes not that stable, but to a very large extent manageable. So a lot of injection has been made to keep the exchange rate fairly stable. What is missing, as I've always said, is what you do afterwards. What you do afterwards is very, very crucial. And that's where I think a lot more discussion needs to take place. We as a people, for many, many years, haven't paid enough attention to having open debates about the right way forward. We haven't paid enough attention to what is the best approach to modernizing agriculture. We haven't paid enough attention to how do we link agriculture to industry. We haven't paid enough attention to what would generate employment for young people. We haven't paid enough attention to how do we ensure that the infrastructure that we invest in yields returns well in excess of what it costs to put them in place. So there are arguments to be made for different approaches. And until we do that, one government will try something, may or may not get results. Another government will try a different thing. And the more time we spend on trying things that have not been tested, the less likely it becomes that we'll find that way forward. So I have no doubt in my mind that there is macro stability now. Will that stability stand the test of time? Will that stability be there when oil prices drop sharply? I can't tell.
Prof, as we wrap up the conversation, are you retired properly or you are retired?
I'm retired from the University of Ghana.
Okay.
So officially, I'm a retiree. But I have other things I'm doing that keep me quite busy, probably even busier than when I was working as a Vice-Chancellor.
What have you been doing?
I run a network of 16 research universities in Africa. It's a network of 16 of some of the, shall I say, best universities in the region, 16 of Africa's flagship universities. It's a network that seeks to increase significantly the amount of research being done in our universities. It's a network that seeks to increase significantly the number of or the contribution that African universities make to the generation of global knowledge. You know, it's a way of saying to the world that, look, we are doing good research in Africa, and those studies that we do must be reflected in how global debates are shaped. 6 of the members are in South Africa, some of the best South African universities: Cape Town, Stellenbosch, Pretoria, Rhodes, KwaZulu-Natal, and Stellenbosch. So, and then outside of South Africa, you have Makerere in Uganda, Nairobi in Kenya, Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, University of Rwanda in Kigali, Ife, that's Obafemi Awolowo University, and then you have Ibadan, and then you have Lagos, and then of course we have University of Ghana here in Accra, and then Sheikh Anta Diop University in Dakar, Senegal. Quite recently, less than a month ago, we received a grant of £20 million from UKRI to enhance the work of our centers of excellence. So basically, what I sought to do at the University of Ghana, today I have a much bigger platform to influence actions. For example, we've created a center of excellence for poverty and inequality at the University of Cape Town. It's going to work with researchers at the University of Ghana and also University of Nairobi. They'll be producing PhD candidates, and if they're successful, get degrees that reflect their interest and specialization in poverty and inequality. We have created a center of excellence at Pretoria on food security, where we expect to bring together all the best researchers in our 16 universities working on food security. Yeah, so the network, which is called the African Research Universities Alliance, ARUA for short, has become the main instrument for bringing about change in African countries. So that's what keeps me busy. But beyond that, I'm spending a lot of time on my memoirs.
Oh, so you're writing?
I'm writing my memoirs, yes. I'm writing what I've experienced in my time, not only as Vice-Chancellor, but as a researcher, as an African researcher. So yes, as you can tell, I do have a very interesting life. People may not see it. You know, people think that this is a man suffering from all these accusations and therefore has a miserable life. No. I don't allow my enemies to get the best of me.
We will be looking forward to reading the memoir when it is done. Thank you very much for your time, Professor Ernest Aryeetey. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. Thank you for watching Face to Face. My name is Godfred Akotobuafa. Have a good day.